Right. Item 1, apologies for absence.
Yes, Chair, received apologies from councillors Bullard, Chesters, Mack, Petrinos, Saxby, Liz Spear, Derek Spear, Gubb, Knight and Davies, Chair.
Thank you. Item 2, to approve of the correct record the minutes of the meeting held on the 23rd of November 2022, pages 7 to 18. Do I have a mover? Thank you. Seconder? Thank you. All in favour? Anyone against? Any abstentions? Item 3, Chair's announcement. First of all, I'd like to welcome Councillor Victoria Nell to her first meeting of the council. Very welcome. You all make her feel welcome as well, please. Item B, Chair's Civics and Service date. Just a note for your diary. The date for my civic service this year is Sunday, February the 26th, and it's a morning service with a luncheon afterwards. Thank you. Item 4, business brought forward by or with the consent of the chair. Don't have any. Item 5, replies to any questions submitted by the public and or to receive petitions under Part 4 Council Procedures, paragraph 8 and 9 of the Constitution. None received. Item 6, to consider motions of which notice has been submitted by members in accordance with Part 4 Council Procedure Rules, paragraph 11 of the Constitution. None received. Item 7, declaration of interest.
Yes, Chair, received the following declarations of interest. Councillor Davis has declared an other registrable interest in item 19 on the agenda, and Councillor Ian Broom has declared in item 19 other registrable interest, Chair.
Thank you. Item 8, Chair's replies to any questions to council by members submitted under Part 4 Council Procedure Rules, paragraph 10 of the Constitution. None received. Item 9, to agree the agenda between Part A and Part B. And there's no Part B, so we'll go straight into Part A. Item 10, anti-fraud and corruption. I'm going to hand over to John in a minute.
Yep, good evening, members. So first item on your agenda tonight is anti-fraud and corruption. This is going to be a presentation by Ken Johnson, who's our counter-fraud manager at Devon Audit Partnership. Devon Audit Partnership provide our internal audit service across North Devon Council and other Devon councils. And part of that is also looking at the counter-fraud function. And as part of the member training development, it's important that you receive regular updates and briefings on counter-fraud, which you have had in the past. So Ken, it's a pleasure to introduce Ken this evening. Ken's going to do a short presentation and is also here to answer any questions that you may have as well. So he's going to do the presentation via Teams. Has Ken got access to share? Yes. So Ken, nodding your head. I know you just sent a quick email to say you couldn't share, so we'll just make sure you've got that access.
Thank you, John. Got it.
Fantastic. And over to you again. Thank you, members.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. My name's Ken Johnson. I'm the Counter Fraud Services Manager for Devon Audit Partnership. Obviously, North Devon is part of that partnership and very welcome. I just want to go through a few things with you. I know you've got a packed agenda. What I'll do is I'll share my screen now and hopefully you'll be able to see what we're talking about. If you've got any questions, obviously we'll happy to do that at the end. Bear with me. Hopefully, just give me a thumbs up if you can see the lovely. Thank you very much. So Devon Audit Partnership, as I say, I'm the counter fraud side of things there. The internal audit is all obviously supplied by Devon Audit Partnership, and we're looking at risk and we're working quite closely with some of your officers in that area. all those three things sort of link together in that bubble diagram to give you the best assurance we can as to the work going forward and the strength and resilience for North Devon. Who are we? Who am I? So, as I say, we are Devon Audit Partnership. We work right across various authorities within Devon, and now we're working with Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue as well. So we're trying to pull everything together and make it more robust and safer for everybody. And from my perspective, that's the counter fraud perspective. But obviously, we're talking about internal audit and that full assurance package. Who am I? I've been working in the area of counter fraud for about 15 years. I'm an accredited counter fraud specialist. That's all I do, all day, every day. And believe me, there's not enough hours in the day. And hopefully, we'll do more of these sessions. And put it this way, I could probably spend some of the courses that I go on for, i.e. bribery and corruption, and just fraud alone would be a week's worth. So we're trying to squeeze it into a condensed package for you to absorb and take in. So, as I say, I've prosecuted hundreds of cases over the years, and we've dealt with many thousands of investigations for criminal activity of fraud and related offences. Something I want you to think about. When you look at that diagram, all fraud basically rotates around that diagram, and pressure has never been any worse than it has been at the moment in living memory. So that could be financial pressure, various other pressures. What that means is the likelihood of fraud occurring is increasing in that area for pressure. The opportunity is there, i.e., local authorities have never been as pushed to provide the services that they do over such a wide area for a long time, and budget constraints and various other pressures that, cost of living pressure and prices of things is affecting local authorities as much as anyone else. And what that means is there may be further gaps in the defences going forward. And let's be honest, the rationalisation, every fraudster I've ever interviewed under caution has a rational explanation for what they're doing. And at the moment, that would be, well, I can't afford any other option, maybe. So we're looking at a perfect storm for fraud. And if you're in any doubt, most government sort of inquiries into this sort of topic and findings are that 41% of all criminal activity is now fraud related. So when you're looking at that as a UK statistic, you are absolutely more likely to be a victim of fraud than any other crime in the country. So with that in mind, it's important to sort of bring that to the forefront of people's minds. All of you sat there will have mobile phones, email accounts, and let's be honest, they're constantly under attack. You're constantly being told somebody's hacked your eBay account, or you're constantly being told there's a package for you, and most of us just delete that. So that 41% actually represents reported crime. So most of fraud attempts go unreported. So you can see the size of the problem. I'm going to quote Professor Mark Button. I've shared sort of presentations with him in the past, but he's much more, obviously he's a professor for one thing, but he's much more involved in the central government review of fraud. And they're estimating that there's 190 billion cost to the UK economy every year. And that is more than we spend on health and defence combined, or welfare payments, bar pensions. What they're saying now is it equates to about £7,000 per household annually. Now, I don't know about you, but I could probably do with that extra £7,000 in income. So the government know this. There have been papers out from the Commons and the Lords recently about we're way behind in trying to tackle this huge issue. And when you look at that on the right-hand side, the local government fraud could be as high as 7.3 billion annually. Think about the services that we provide to the customers within our constituencies, how much good that money could do. And when you look at those areas with the Ministry of Defence, Department of Work and Pensions and the NHS, they're all areas that could probably do with a lot more money, as well as local government. So it is a huge problem. It's going on and it's growing. COVID didn't do anything to reduce that. In fact, it just changed, and fraud constantly just changes to fit whatever situation is arising. You may have heard about frauds for pet sales, romance fraud, all this sort of stuff where they knew that we were locked down, they knew that we were stuck at home, and they knew that we were a captive audience, if you like. So all fraud does is the same old wine in new bottles, whether it be cyber attacks. It's the same principle. So think about the size of the issues that are challenging local authorities and how much potentially they may be losing. It's so important that we look at this and put in place measures to counteract that. And I'll go on to that and what we're doing with Mid Devon in a second. I'm really not going to educate everybody in a classroom environment and tell you what fraud is, but basically it's dishonesty. It's acting in a dishonest manner with a dishonest intent, creating a fraud by false representation, failing to disclose information, so that's not doing something you should do, and fraud by abuse of position. And for clarity, that is acting in a manner that you against the principles of someone that you're supposed to be acting for. When we deal with internal cases, that tends to be the one that we would use, and all it has to do is create a gain or cause a loss. So those are the foundation stones, if you like, of all those criminal offences. There are other offences that we deal with for local government, but fraud, there is a review into this 2006 Act, and we may, and I say may, be being given further powers to investigate and find information in support of our investigations in fraud cases. I know it sounds strange, but if it's a social housing fraud, I can go and get someone's bank account details and all their statements for the past 6 years. But if it's a Fraud Act offence, I have to rely on the banks being cooperative. That's not how it should be, and we're currently talking to central government and trying to get that legislation changed. So what are the types of fraud within councils? Social housing fraud is a huge issue at the moment, obviously with homelessness statistics and the availability of homes for local people. Council tax is always an issue, what we would class as low value, high volume, potentially things like single person discount claims where they're not living there on their own. There are procurement issues with whether we purchase the right equipment, whether we use the right avenues for that. Blue badge, bus pass, they're very, very similar in a way. We deal with all that. Parking permits, insurance claims. Insurance claims against the council have always been a bone of contention, and we look into those where there is evidence that it's not quite what it seems. We do internal work, and basically invoice and mandate frauds are quite regular, but we would pass them on to action fraud. But we deal with basically any allegation of fraud will come through us, and we will act obviously in line with your policy and processes and strategy and response plans. But on the right hand side there are some of the legislation that we use, not just the Fraud Act. And I can say we've prosecuted down to obviously RIPA and the proceeds of crime. That's the legislation we would use to prosecute somebody, and the last three are rules of the game, if you like. But there's an awful lot to take into account, and this is why it's important that North Devon has actually joined us in the DAP family, if you like, in as much as you've now got access to specialised investigators in my team. Myself, I act and I sit on quite a lot of the counter fraud measures across the UK. I present nationally, so there's lots of things going on, and we're trying to raise the profile of this. So it's important that North Devon is in the family, as it were, and joining up the thinking, because what happens in another local authority, you can guarantee is going to potentially knock on and eventually end up at North Devon's door in some shape or form. So having that network is really, really important. I'm not going to tell you we know it all. When I think I've know it all, you know, something comes out of left field, and I do wonder how people think of how to get around these frauds sometimes. But yeah, we're all still learning, and the main thing is you are now available to draw from that learning. What we've been doing is looking at some of the risks to North Devon with officers in your authority. And when you look at risks, you know, most people would think about fraud and think of the financial issues, which is obviously a major part of it. But when organisations do get defrauded to a serious extent, there's normally huge reputational damage that goes with that. Basically because local authority is entrusted with the budget to look after many people, many vulnerable people. And, you know, if you're losing money, that doesn't bode well for trying to keep everything else on a straight line. Threat to life or serious injury, some people think that's maybe a bit strong, but because we've got a very limited amount of time, I normally go into what's happening with Grenfell. And I think there's something like 36 live investigations. I know it was some time ago, and the police are not willing to make sort of comments on this until the full public inquiry has been heard. But the threat to serious life and serious injury is now being looked at for health and safety offences and fraud offences. And that's because the whole chain of how that cladding ended up on the building, people were telling lies, they were acting dishonestly, and they were making false statements. And as I showed you earlier, that's really all you need for an act of fraud. So there are quite a lot of organisations and individuals now that are being looked at by the police for fraud. So yes, fraud does cause a threat to life and serious injury. Criminal civil liability issues, again, you know, if we're talking about the people that we represent and we're not able to give the service that we're required to, or it's substandard because of someone we've contracted in, then we leave ourselves open to criminal civil liability issues. And not least, ongoing service availability. When you think about the loss of any finance or reputational loss or damage, that has a direct knock-on to what we can supply in the future. So again, this whole thing about how much are we losing? Can we stop that? Do we need to stop that? What's the risk? We need to think about that. And again, the victims in this, I know fraud against local authority is against the budgets and, you know, our services, but the victims end up being the people we represent. They end up being the people on you know, some of the most vulnerable in our society that we have to provide services to. And I don't think anybody in the room is probably, you know, unaware of the fact that services are being squeezed. The indicators for fraud, obviously there are personal, sometimes they're organisational and transactional. We look into all of these things, and as I say, if I had all day to talk to you, I'd go into what that looks like. Banks don't allow people to take, they have to take 2 weeks off in a block, and that may sound silly, but actually it's very difficult to hide something if you're on leave for 2 weeks, whereas if you're off on leave for 1 week, it is. There are a whole load of red flags, and it doesn't necessarily mean that somebody is committing fraud if they don't have 2 weeks off. But along with other things and personal, organisational, transactional and internal weaknesses, you may start to build a picture of there's been something wrong. And they are all red flags. And as I say, this sort of stuff is what we're trying to make available to your officers, so that we can go in and look at some of the areas that you may be suffering fraud, risk or loss from. So we look at that, and when we're talking about risk, there's stuff that we know. So they're the known knowns. So the average business in the UK loses between 3 and 5% of its entire budget to fraud and related offences. Now, there may be better, and some local authorities better than others. There may be really good checks and balances in place, but no public sector is immune to fraud. And when you look at this as part of your budget, potentially, and I say potentially, this is not, you know, I'm not going to get John into trouble here, but potentially between 3 and 5% of your budget equates to that 410 and 690,000. That's an awful lot when it's compared to your overall budget, and it's something that you couldn't afford to lose. I'm not saying you are losing that much, but that's what statistics would suggest is potentially there. What we're trying to do with this risk management approach, and with your officers, and identifying and then blocking those risks, is to reduce that. Nothing is acceptable, no loss is acceptable, but to reduce it to the minimum that we can get away with. So there are some known unknowns. So we know that we're losing money, but at the moment we're not sure where that may be. And that's what we need to dig into. And we have unknown knowns. And we do know that we're losing money, but are we doing enough? That's where we're coming in, and we're helping with North Devon. And we're trying to put things in place and help you to save more money. And obviously, there's lots of unknown unknowns. You don't know what you don't know. And involving us within your risk, sort of looking at risk process, looking at fraud, means that we can transfer the information that we know that is happening across the UK and local authorities into what change that from unknown unknowns to knowns. I know that there's a lot of knowns there, and this is a risk management process, but yeah, if you can change something into a known, at least you can do something about it. So what I'm saying is, you know, I'm in contact with fraud managers across the UK, both in private, public sectors, and fraud is the same wherever it is, and we share information on the different attacks that are coming in, so we can try and use that to help North Devon as well. Okay, so what are we currently doing with you? Well, I know that North Devon is currently participating in the National Fraud Initiative exercise run by the Cabinet Office. That's important. If you don't know what that is, that's basically all of the data, well, certain data sets held by the council, sent off to the Cabinet Office, which is then mixed and matched and run around in their machinery against things like the DWP, against all of the civil service departments, major employers within the UK. And basically, in the next month or so, all local authorities will get those matches back with various levels of risk attached to them, and be expected to basically review those against potential for fraud. You've got a current anti-fraud, bribery and corruption policy and strategy and response plan in place. That's quite a robust policy and strategy and response plan, and it details exactly what the local authority will do when it picks up a fraud, what it will do to identify fraud, and the lengths that the council is willing to commit to. We're currently working on, as I say, fraud risk identification. We're putting together a register, and obviously John's been very involved in that, helping us get that off the ground. And hopefully at a future meeting, I'll be able to bring you some further progress on that. Our internal audit teams, obviously I train our internal audit teams on counter fraud, and they're currently looking at counter fraud resilience across the piece. So as they're doing audits, they'll be looking for potential gaps in your defences, and obviously they would flag that to me. And as I say, you now have access to accredited counter fraud specialists. That's really, really important, because what happens now is council officers are actually able to refer stuff, concerns, allegations through to myself and my team, and we're able to ascertain and look at it and say whether there is a potential criminal offence there or not, or whether it needs to be dealt with in another way. And that's quite important to get that early on, because what tends to happen is these things get forgotten or they get treated a different way and they don't get recorded as fraud, and we don't get a true picture, and we're not able to reinforce defences where they need to be defended. And I say access to a wider counter-fraud network across the UK. There's some great work going across the UK on counter-fraud. The central government have just created the Public Sector Fraud Authority, and I'm in touch with the chief executive of that organisation because we help put together some of the information and some of the standards that are required for counter-fraud investigators, both in the civil service and local government. So there's a huge network that is now available to North Devon, and that will help inform that register, will help inform that defence. And as I say, the main thing for us is to reduce it to a manageable, or as I say, nothing's acceptable, but a situation where we can survive. That's the Grenfell statistics, but basically at the end of that presentation, and I'm sure that the organisers of this will put this out to you, there's a lot of links there. There's a lot of information going around at the moment, and I've been doing this for 15 years, and I'm getting a feeling that actually central government is really waking up to how much money is being lost through fraudulent activity. Some of it is organised crime, some of it is just people making bad decisions on a local level, and there are a lot of reports there. And if you're, for me, I read them, but if you're, you can't sleep one night, well worth a read. You'll find that everybody's accepting that fraud is actually going through the roof, and I always use that picture of the UK there, not because I think it's pretty, but the fact is fraud is everywhere, and if there are people, you will have fraud, and at some point it will cost you. And you can see from that light map, you can see where people are, you can see where habitation is. Nobody's exempt from it, and as I say, it's a national, well, it's a global issue, but it's a national problem. That was a really, really brief run through. So my details are on there. I'm happy to take any questions. I'm going to stop sharing now.
Okay, members, I'll give a couple of minutes for questions. Does anybody have any questions? Please, Councillor Lane.
Yeah,
Sorry, just stand.
it was quite interesting to hear. Probably that was a long time ago we were in here, sorry. Old habits die hard, but in this case, one of the case. It's interesting to hear the gentleman when he quoted the annual cost of fraud equates to 7,000 per household. And I'm pretty sure he said he wouldn't say no to some of that. But that's just but my question would be to John, give one or two examples of how this council's been caught fraud, and I assume that's the reason you joined the organisation.
Yeah, the latter part of your question, we joined Devon Audit Partnership about 3 years ago as part of the internal audit contracts. Obviously, the fraud as part of that team, obviously, was part of the attractiveness as well, because obviously we didn't have a separate counter fraud service here at the team before. So that strengthened the counter fraud protection for the council, and also gave us a chance to embed those strategies into the council, which we have adopted through governance committee. In terms of examples of fraud that this council's been involved in, I can't even recall any, because we haven't had any fraud cost associated with the budget. There are areas within sections of the council, such as like council tax, where there might have been council tax benefit claims that might have had some fraudulent activity to it. So there is an indirect cost to us from that, because obviously it does mean that the benefit claim might be incorrect. Where that's been picked up, that's then been referred through to the relevant agencies. We've then recovered that benefit through the courts and put orders against those people to repay benefit. So I suppose housing benefit is probably the most popular one out there, I suppose, in terms of counter fraud that has impacted the council. we pay those payments out and then claim the money back from DWP. So in essence, the fraud is more against the DWP than it is North Devon Council budget, albeit we're involved in the recovery of that element of money through the courts. So housing benefit is probably the most, let's say, popular one out there that we've been involved in.
Thank you.
And sorry, I could just add into that. Fraud is a hidden crime. So it's I have actually had someone come into my office and actually put their hands up and say they committed fraud because they couldn't sleep. And that was very commendable. But 99.9% of the time, it's a hidden crime. And when you look at things like social housing fraud, it costs the council huge amounts of money, but no one is coming forward saying that they're illegally subletting their property. You know, it's something that, you know, we have to go and dig and find and raise the awareness so that we get those referrals in. And the whole part of this is you've got a very good policy and strategy and response plan now. We look at the risks and we get some publicity out there and we try and get that. It builds organically. And it's about raising people's awareness of what there is out there. And John's quite right. When you talk about fraud within local government, people talk about benefits, housing benefit, and council tax support and single person discount and things like that. A lot of the time it's about getting the money back, which I understand. But a more robust approach would be you actually go after those people. And that's what we've got in place now is we're setting up the foundations to make that happen. So, you know, local authorities are local authorities, you know, they have various roles. But I would say no area is exempt from potential fraud. So all I can do is answer that way. If you point a stick at a department, you probably, if we dig deep enough and we have the resources and the time, you will probably find it. It's just that's part of this risk assessment is where are the problems? What can we do?
Yeah, no, let's just say thank you very much. So it's very, you know, it's very interesting. I look forward to listening when we have the trainings programs that you do as well. But thank you for coming on tonight and going through all that with us.
Thank you.
Just add, we'll get the slides circulated to members as well, so that members have got the presentation tonight.
That would be lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you, Ken.
Okay, thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Bye.
Item 11, operations of Landmark and Queen's Theatre. I'd like to welcome Paul Jefferson, Creative Director of Celador, please. Thank you.
Sorry for the shuffling. Good evening. My name is Paul Jackson, and as Bill, I'm the creative director of Celador Worldwide, and I will become the chief executive officer of Landmark Theatres Limited, and that's my purpose in being here this evening. I also immediately want to introduce my colleague David Hutchinson, who is the CEO of Celador Worldwide and who will become the chair of Landmark Theatres Limited. David is also the CEO of Park Entertainment. I'm going to go through these slides and then we'll make some time for questions. So first of all, what I want to say is why are we doing this? The reason why we're doing it is the organisation is moving into a charitable structure with a new governance, but it is built on the existing venue set. So let's see if I can make this work. Vision, mission and values. I will summarise it. The purpose of the new organisation is to deliver the highest quality theatre by, for and to the widest demographic in the least engaged places in England. This is an organisational chart. I don't want people to be confused or concerned by the movement of the companies. Landmark Theatres Limited is a renaming of Celador North Devon Limited, which is a company which is a non-profit distributing company limited by guarantee. The remaining Celador venues entities have migrated beneath that top co. We call it conscious uncoupling. Effectively, there is a management buyout style separation going on, by which I mean that there will be a separation of assets and liabilities. This, of course, is being conducted in the friendliest possible terms and is now in principle complete. The signature of the agreement triggers the application to Charity Commission, and the whole thing is built on partnerships, and the founding partnership is between Landmark Theatres Limited and Celador Worldwide. That's just to reassure you about financials. The numbers are deliberately small, so no one can actually see them, but in fact, the financial position of the organisation is positive. We, in the post-COVID period, have obviously moved from a situation where we had substantial CRF support, for which thank you very much to people in this room, because you were supportive in getting us that support, and without it, it's very likely we wouldn't be here having this chat today. But the fact is that through a process of increased financial rigour and careful, basically book cleaning, cost control, we got the organisations, and there is an organisation here and an organisation in Peterborough, which incidentally took over another theatre in the course of this period. Both of them were in profit for the first month in November of this year. The accumulated P&L for the year for the organisation is now positive, and we have removed ourselves from quite significant cash flow issues. We've come through it. So where am I going next? I want to talk to you about the audience opportunity. Again, very briefly, there are parts of the audience that we're not contacting, but they're quite interesting. There are significant affluent sectors of audience that we're not getting into the theatres in North Devon enough. So it's not just to do with protected categories, although we will be working through our participation programmes and our talent development programmes to engage those audiences. It's also actually both second homeowners and also relatively affluent residents who we're not getting in enough. Now, to some extent, that's because of the programme that we have, and there's a need to widen the programme. So now we move gently forward to the potential benefits for the new organisation. You'll notice in the top left-hand corner, it says Arts Council England. The reason why it says Arts Council England is that, as many of you will know, Landmark Theatres Limited has been offered the opportunity to join the portfolio. And the offer is based on £1 million a year over 3 years, £3 million. It's a significant financial investment on the part of Arts Council England in this new organisation, and also in this county. The bid was submitted through South West. The head office will be the Queen's Theatre in Buckport Street in Barnstaple. Amongst the other partners, you notice obviously Celador Worldwide, producers of musical theatre, and also family entertainment and children's theatre, amongst other things. You'll see also there Payne's Plough, you'll see English Touring Theatre, you'll see yourselves, you'll see Tamasha, you'll see the Birmingham Royal Ballet, and you'll see the National Theatre. National Theatre are already working with us in Northern Devon. There's one project which I'll mention on the next slide. The investment that is being made by the National Theatre in our organisation through Theatre Nation is significant. Equally, we have a new arrangement with Birmingham Royal Ballet that is starting in Peterborough. Birmingham Royal Ballet are becoming a regular visitor to Peterborough for the first time ever. They're also going to be running talent and participation programmes with us in Peterborough, and there is no reason why, and in fact, it's very likely those programmes will also come to North Devon in time. Last but not least, Payne's Plough, whose rather attractive tent was at the outside the Landmark in Milton Keynes last autumn. They will be working with us. They're developing a new writers' development initiative, which will be focused on 4 places, including Northern Devon. That's already starting. That'll work every year, and it will turn into tangible opportunities for young writers. Even actually tangible opportunities for older writers, because we don't have to be age specific about how we find talent. We'll find talent wherever we find it, and as much of it as possible. Organisational growth, again, intentionally small, so no one can see very much. But it's really important to obfuscate with slides. My point here is, you can't see it, but my point is that you have a relatively lean structure. This is already against 7 million turnover. Now, typically, a funded theatre would have significantly more blue blobs than that. I want to make it clear that our instincts are fundamentally commercial, as well as being artistic. We're artistic driven, but also commercial. That's the centerpiece of the business plan. And I'll move on to organisational growth part 2. So this is what happens if we take on another theatre. Now, if you count up the blobs, and those of you at home with nothing better to do before you move on watching the telly will be able to count up the blobs, you'll notice that the number of blobs is not that much bigger. Now, if you imagine that this new organisation will also have a turnover of, say, 3 million, 4 million, obviously there's an economies of scale benefit. I just want to make it entirely clear to everybody in this room, and also anyone who's listening from Arts Council, that we will not be diluting the investment by taking on additional places. What we will do is we will say to the additional place, if you want the programme work, we need you to match the investment. Outputs. So programme output. By moving in this direction, we can give you more of what you want to see. That's the message of this slide, because through partnership working, we can get more work of a higher quality into the theatres here. By working closely with Celador, we can, and we already have, brought significant commercial theatre to this part of the world and to these venues, but we can do much better by this broader approach. Participation. I mentioned Speak Up. Speak Up is a programme that will work in schools in Northern Devon. That's funded through our partnership with the National Theatre. I think it's about £150,000 worth of budget. Basically, what it means is that each year we will go into schools with the National, and those schools will have the opportunity to build their own piece of work. It's a co-creation project. They will see it through, they will own it, they will complete it, it will be shown, and it will be recorded. That's happening once a year for 3 years in Northern Devon. National Theatre Schools touring, that will be happening once a year for 3 years in Northern Devon. BRB Education, as I said, I've mentioned that, that's starting in Peterborough. We hope we'll be bringing that here. It's our aspiration to make Ilfracombe and the beautiful theatre in Ilfracombe a centre for young people and for learning. We have significant plans. It was a core commitment that was made in the first agreement between Celador and the council, and we aim to fulfil them. Don't want to talk about those today. Don't want to go on. Want to have you give people a chance to ask us some questions. Last but not least, talent. In the way that the organisation's been conceived and that we've business planned it, we see the promotion of talent as a fundamental part of our purpose. So therefore, in the way that we will engage with volunteering, we will engage with volunteering through most of our touch points as an organisation, but also we will look to find people who wish to be trained by us through that process. They don't have to be. It can be a health and well-being activity. It can just be fun. They will inform us because they will help us to align our programme with our audience, which is essential to us, but also it's an opportunity to create training opportunities. That didn't come out right, you know what I mean. Most obviously, we will look for talent. We have a set of programmes which are covered by our national portfolio negotiation, our bid, and we will multiply those programmes to find talented people and to support them into the profession. That's a core objective for us. And we'll do it in very broad terms. It doesn't have to be just to do with performance. David and I on the way on the phone later on, we're talking about immersive theatre arts. I've also got live conversations with colleagues of ours in Petrock and videographers there's a possibility to go for a producing studio, a music producing studio. All of this we will wish to centre around Ilfracombe, and we will be having to raise cash to support it. As I say, so towns in the broadest terms, and as we are a producing output, we will, as we're a producing organisation, we will be able to create outputs of the most important terms. In other words, we'll be able to commission people and give people jobs. Okay. Economic benefits. You love us. According to SALT, every pound that is spent on a ticket is worth £1.40 to the place where the ticket is bought. I've been rather more conservative about that, but the figures are pretty interesting. We're going to track this. We're going to track it really carefully. You're going to get stats from us. We reckon that the potential benefit economically of many of our activities in terms of creating stickiness around employment, in terms of improving inner cities, we think that they should be tracked. We think that if we share these stats with you, you won't only just like us a bit more, but you'll help us to raise the cash that we need and the other resources that we need to be able to build our partnerships, particularly here. Deepening partnership. Well, I mean, this is the last slide, and of course I'd be too rude as to say I'm going to ask you for more. David would never ask you for more, neither of us will, but actually we probably will. We're going to be interested to talk to you around capital plans. We are definitely interested to talk to you around maintenance of plant. We have aged plant in our buildings, which is an unsustainable financial risk for us and is intrinsic to those buildings. And last but not least, we will look to link the outputs that we deliver to your priorities as a council. And that we will use as our means to justify the continuation of your provision of what is currently called management charge, but I think I prefer to call it subsidy, and maybe even the increase of that subsidy. That's our pitch. What would you like to ask us? And in particular, as I've already spoken far too much, what would you like to ask my colleague David?
Councillor Busher. Would you mind standing up, please? Thank you.
Yes, through the chair, if I may, could you elaborate more on the change in structure and how you're moving assets and liabilities, how that benefits us, and how it strengthens Northern Devon's efforts over Celador Worldwide, which I don't know a great deal about.
I'll go first. You go second. Essentially, being a trust will first of all increases the quality of our governance, and secondly allows us to bid for funds that we would otherwise not be able to bid for, such as large trust and foundation. So, for instance, the Garfield Weston Foundation or Esme Fairburn, they will not entertain a bid from an organisation unless they have charitable status. In order to achieve that, there must be a level of financial settlement and separation.
No, I mean, that's pretty much the fundamentals of it. I mean, the company itself is limited by some level of liability with the structure of, how we create and produce shows. So every single show we create is in its own different company. So there's always protections around the business and how it's been operating. As Paul says, this is about setting up a structure for governance that allows us to go in for more funding. It separates the mission, because this is, in much of what we've communicated to the Arts Council, it's around non-profit generating as much as profit generating ambitions around talent development, about developing and widening participation. And Celador Worldwide as the company is a commercial for-profit company to produce shows, to put a lot of bums and seats and to generate a lot of income. So what it's doing is clarifying those missions, relating those companies so that the work that Celador does to produce large-scale commercial work can benefit the venues in their turnover ambitions, but also not limit the theatres from going out for considerable opportunities for funding, which benefits a much wider range of activity.
I think maybe I didn't ask my question straight enough. You didn't mention any assets and whether assets are going to be moving in or out of Celador Worldwide. And so far as liabilities, you guys just mentioned limiting the liabilities, I guess, of you guys, if it's a charitable structure. I was thinking more of the assets of Celador Worldwide and how they're moving.
The assets that are currently within the venues will be taken over in entirety by the new trust.
Thank you.
We're providing reassurance for that. There's no, in entirety.
Councillor Biederman.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for your enthusiastic presentation. Really quite enjoyed it. Obviously, I think, you know, for those of us who are a little bit older, we remember that night at the Cedars when we thought we were going to lose our theatres and, you know, so it is fantastic that we've still got two theatres and incredible things that we can go and see and watch. There's all the positive. No, it really is positive. But my only big concern and question, I guess, is young people. And I think my big thing when I was at Cedars, years ago, was it, John? 3, 4, I don't know. It seems,
I think about 6 years ago.
you know, was losing that theatre for the young people that, you know, seeing their confidence grow when they did gang show or stagecoach or whatever group it was that could go in there and feel like superstars for a week, you know, and parents and grandparents and everybody coming on. And it, you know, obviously you make a big thing of Ilfracombe, and it seems to me listening to you that Ilfracombe is going to be where all the youth stuff happens. But then we have Chumley and South Malton and Barnstable, and, you know, it's a million miles away from Ilfracombe with respect. And, you know, are we losing it all from Barnstable, and is it all going to go to Ilfracombe, or is there going to be a bit more of a mix and match, which is, well, I'm hoping you're going to say. And the cost to those, you know, obviously cost is a big problem. But those, you know, I just want to see the opportunity for those young people to come in, because like I say, they're the talent of the future, and yeah, I mean, that, you get where I'm coming from, so.
I want to reassure you that the approach in Ilfracombe is to use that venue as a centre for young people. It's not to suggest, and Martin won't be there anything that the venue does. It's not to suggest that there won't be opportunities that we deliver throughout the county and also in both towns. That would be wrong. For instance, the schools that we're working with for the Theatre Nation are spread across the county. And the first piece of mid-scale national theatre touring will tour to Queens. So we won't be, it won't be the case that there'll only be access to programmes for young people in Ilfracombe. So that's where they'll be set.
So, sorry, thank you, Chair. I mean, so you reassure me that the opportunity will be there if local community groups like the gang show, like Stagecoach, and I forget one in Barnstable, but they would be able to use the Queen's Theatre. No problem. And would they get any sort of discount if they did it over, I don't know, the National Theatre coming in?
We have an approach to hires which makes the distinction between community hires and commercial hires. That's the first thing I will say. The second thing is that we have to balance the commitment to the programs that we deliver with the commitment to those people who hire our buildings. So far as Stagecoach is concerned, and what I would say, and I'm not dodging your question, it would depend on what basis they're working with us. If that is something which is part of one of our programs, that's one thing. If they're a hire, then I'm afraid we need to deliver net out of hire.
Yeah.
Thank you.
One thing to add on top of that in terms of talent development and young people is that I think the structures and the relationships around the National Theatre and some of those organisations that are partnering, it's as much about investing in this community and investing in voices and talent as much as also then giving a pathway for that to travel outside of the area. You know, I mean, there's this one-way bus from London to many regions in the UK, which is exactly why the Arts Council have funded underfunded regions like North Devon, because there's far too much money that was perceived to be going to one area, and the opportunities for voices in North Devon being seen in London and other parts of the region, regional UK, is really important. So we've structured it so it's not just about giving a platform here, it's about then giving an opportunity for that, the voices, the work, the talent to be seen in other places, you know, which is a challenge, you know, and I take your point about the cost of access and also the infrastructure. which is a huge challenge that we've talked a lot about in our
Yeah.
organisation, to getting to locations, Ilfracombe or Barnstaple, to engage in programmes and art. So we are thinking actively on how we can break down those barriers, aren't we?
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
My question is about, you're saying you're not attracting the more affluent members of our community into the theatre. How are you doing at attracting the lower demographic?
Actually, rather better than I thought. And when we've actually started to look at data, rather better than I thought. Nowhere near as effectively as I would wish us to be. And we're starting to develop programs to deal with that, but rather better than I thought.
Thank you. Just as a quick summary, it's good to see that Theatre Petrock's back in the landmark and its proper home, because my daughter was a member of Theatre Petrock in the 2 years that we couldn't use it, and it was really sad, and it's very nice to see it back.
Good.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's more of an opinion than a question, actually. In my previous life, I was actually head of the creative arts faculty at Ilfracombe Academy. So I welcome what you were saying. In particular, coming 3 slides back now, you said about mixed media, looking at mixed media productions. And I am totally convinced that's the way to attach yourself to the younger people. And it's the way forward. And as I said, it's not a question, but only this morning as an example, I was reading with great enthusiasm about the forthcoming new David Hockney exhibition, which is for an 84-year-old person, is streets ahead of the technology of some of the stuff that we can handle. So to encompass that in the younger person as well, and use their skills, particularly with the schools you've got in the area, I think is really exciting. I wish you every good luck.
And I want to just say, we as our plans develop, obviously we will be consulting it and we will let you know what we're up to. And I very much appreciate it if you're involved, particularly, I mean, we've just persuaded Ilfracombe Academy to take one of our projects, and it was quite hard work. Because schools are you think, well, I mean, obviously someone like me turns up, obviously shut the doors, don't they? But you think that if you turned up with a bit of money and say you're going to bring a national theatre in, they'd say whippy, but no, they don't. Because they're so busy trying to do their day job. So we have a lot of work to do around this, is what I'm saying, and I hope you might be able to help us.
Thank you, Councillor.
Yeah, near the end of your presentation, there was quite a well disguised pitch for a bit more money. I well remember going back 10, 12 years, it was a substantial figure. We contributed to 2 figures. Somewhere 650,000 annually comes to mind. That was slashed. I'm just curious to know from John what it currently is. And just one other little point, reference was made to the unable to attract the affluent members of the society. You also mentioned or we have a second home. Unfortunately, you obviously are going to find difficulty in catching them at home.
Can I just say something? Can I just say something about second homeowners? I think we should be trying harder to get a summer audience into our theatres, and I think that there are all sorts of problems. We've really got into trouble trying to do it in Ilfracombe. I hope we're getting a bit smarter at it. I tried to get something into Barnstaple, which I think would have sold like an absolute rocket this next summer, but I can't get it in because the producer won't. Anyway, but that's another story. I think that there are particular ways of advertising to people who are the second homeowners. I think separate. There's second homeowners, and then there's holiday makers, and I think we need to be smarter about both. I think we can get those people in.
Sorry, John. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, members, we currently pay around 150,000 a year for subsidy to theatres. So obviously significantly less than what we previously paid years ago. Members will be aware, obviously, of our financial constraints from the previous presentations I've given at council back in November. But in addition to the revenue contribution, we do also have money in the capital programme for investment in the theatres. So we've got around 315,000 the capital programme for placing the flat roof at the Queen's Theatre, and also some decoration to the southeast and northeast elevations. And we also have money in the capital programme for the Landmark Theatre for investment in the fire alarm system. Now, obviously, some of that investment is obviously responsibility of landlords, some is responsibility of tenants. So obviously, we'll continue those discussions with Paul and David around ongoing maintenance responsibilities. But just to reassure you that we are significantly investing in the theatres, not just on the revenue side, but also on the capital side.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
Is the gentleman impressed by the?
Sorry.
No, I'm just curious to know if the gentleman is impressed by what John said.
David and I are by nature realists, and we understand the situation that organisations such as council find themselves in, and we understand that the arts needs to justify investment. And what I'm saying is that in the medium term, I hope that I'm going to be able to build case to increase your participation, and that people will do it because they wish to do it. But it's not for me to decide. All I'm saying is I will attempt to build the case.
Councillor Pearson.
Sounds great. Sounds really exciting. And I'm really happy that it's going to be focused on young people in Ilfracombe, because actually Ilfracombe so often misses out to the rest of, for that very reason of distance, which Councillor Beedham referred to. But it's usually the other way around. And access for youngsters in Ilfracombe and connection with the school. Fantastic. The school used to be very much involved with the community, did it not, for theatrical things? So it'd be fantastic to get that going again if we can. So yeah, it's great. And I hope our Levelling Up Fund bid works, because that also goes to theatres, doesn't it? So exciting times. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Paul and David, thank you both very much for coming along and sharing this with us. I found it interesting. I hope everybody else did. It's nice to know the vision, and you know, we look forward to seeing what else comes along. But both, thank you very much.
Thank you. We appreciate your engagement very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, members, thank you. Thank you. Right, item 12, report of the leader of the council, Councillor Warden.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Sorry, could we have quiet, please? Thank you.
Today, Ilfracombe seems to be very much in the forefront, because this afternoon I've been attending the joint committee of the House of Lords and the House of Commons regarding human rights, with particular reference to asylum seekers, and they were extremely interested in what actually was happening at Ilfracombe, and the work that's being done by the Pickwell Foundation and our officers and so on. It was an extremely interesting, because I was the only representative of the south of the country. The other representative was one from Kent. Obviously, Kent has got special problems with all the people coming over in the boats. One from Newcastle and the other one was from Glasgow. But I found it extremely interesting, and I hope that there will be a report eventually that will actually enable us to know a little bit more about what the government is thinking on these lines. It's quite obvious that there are many issues that need to be dealt with, such as the amount of money that they are given. I think it's only £9.20 or something like that a week, to subsidise all the extra things they need for children going to school, for example. How do they manage with clothing? How do they manage with going on trips? How do they manage to get extra food and so on? It was very, very interesting. I haven't got time, unfortunately, to go through it all now, but it was something that I was really pleased to be part of. The other thing I wanted to just draw your attention to was the part that I mentioned about the central car park in Barnstable, where we've closed the toilets just at the moment. We decided that strategy and resources on Monday that we would continue with them closed for another 2 or 3 weeks just to see how it actually pans out, because we were getting so much trouble with drugs, paraphernalia, etc., etc. And hopefully somehow, I don't know how, the whole situation will get a little bit better than what it has been, because it has been very worrying to our council officers and to Safer Streets personnel and so on. Obviously, we're looking to see what impact that closure is going to be on whether they go elsewhere in the town and cause problems in those particular areas or what. But I just wanted to draw that to your attention. And if anybody's got any other questions on my report, I'm happy to. Yes, here we are.
Okay, so yes, Leader.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman, and thank you, Leader, for that. And I don't necessarily want an answer now, but I feel I need to take the opportunity to highlight some issues around the last paragraph on the report, and apologies for not getting a written question in. I didn't manage to do that by the time they wanted. But certainly in my area, and I believe others, perhaps you to exec can show some light, but since the frosty, whether we had the ice and snow, recycling and black bin collections are no less than shambolic. And it is, I drove around Witheridge this afternoon after planning. I went back, had to go and pick up my wife's meds. Recycling all over the place. I know it's windy, but it hasn't been collected. Some of it hasn't been collected since before Christmas. And it is, and I hear from colleagues that it is similar in other areas. So, Leader, please, can we have some explanation and some understanding of how we can get this back on track? We did seem to be doing so well, but I just wanted to register that issue, Chairman. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. In response to that, I know that there were lots of people who actually put their waste and recycling out on the wrong day. They didn't realise that because it was a bank holiday on the Monday, that it would be one day late during that week. Of course, we have had extremely stormy weather, to say the least, but I would certainly take that back to
Goes back a bit further than stormy weather, Chairman.
okay, but I will take that back to Mark Kentel and Paul Beck.
Councillor Pearson.
On that topic, I personally think we have got a problem too. I mean, it is, we are littering. Our own collection system is actually littering the countryside. And so we do need to address it. And it could be just about investment in lids for the actual boxes. Something needs to be done because it's just crazy. It doesn't take much of a wind to get things going. And then when things are coming out of our own lorries, it's not good.
In response, I was near Reading over Christmas, and they're having a similar problem up there as well. So perhaps we need to be looking to see if there is another council somewhere that has actually solved the problem. And I think you might come up with one that we ought to look at.
Wales, actually, the way they go.
Yes, thank you.
Well, can I say a positive then on this? I'll be honest, my husband, not me, is really tops on recycling. And we've never had problem with it blowing anywhere because he's very neat with it all. But it could be because I've got a fantastic crew that come where I live. And they are so good. They don't just do it. And I have seen it in other areas where they just chuck it and then you see it all blow out. I've seen it myself. But the crew that come round Marwood are going top notch because they actually do it really gently. They put them all everything back nice and neat. But I noticed a difference. The gentleman's on holiday this week because I had different ones this week and I noticed a difference. But you can get if you get a really good crew, they're spot on, you know, so they're not all bad, you know, it's depending who it is and how they deal with your recycling. Sorry. Yes, of course.
Yeah. No, I mean,
Give a bit of praise there as well, you know what I mean?
yeah, but you're just packing praise.
Yeah, well, you know what I mean.
I go further than saying that that was bad. I think they're all fantastic. They've
Yeah, I
worked really
know.
hard.
Yeah.
I'll take the points back, councillor Yabsley. I'm not aware of any particular issues, to be honest, since before Christmas. There might be some other plans coming up that reflect other issues, but I will take that back. We do have issues on particular days, if suddenly we've got more drivers off sick or something like that. But as far as I'm aware, most of the rains have gone out over the last couple of weeks. So we'll have a look at that, and I'll speak to Mark tomorrow.
And I need to say, no, I didn't mean they're bad,
No, I know.
but that they have some of them, when you've had a lot of them off with COVID and codes, they are stretched sometimes and they do work hard. Councillor Davis.
Thank you. I'm sorry, and I'm going to have to argue with you. So, and the residents of Ashford indeed would also say, well, hang on, because they've had major problems there with their recycling. Now, and I'm happy my district councillors had to leave, unfortunately, but I'll make my own representations for the parish of Kentisbury. And I wish my husband was listening to this, because he's the one complaining about why are we storing now black bags since before Christmas at our own property. It's not great. We're lucky we've got somewhere to put them. We have no bin facility and they're being eaten by mice and rats. That is how unfortunate the whole thing is. We don't get a food waste collection, and that's what's happening out in the countryside. So I'm sorry, Ken, I'm going to have to say that the residents of Ashford, just remember, only this week have had complaints about it, or at the end of last week. Sorry, yes, last week we're complaining about it, but they hadn't had a collection. And in Kentisbury, I can tell you we've had no black bag collection since before Christmas.
I'll take all of those comments back.
Thank you. Councillor Beedman, unless you're going to say anything different.
Well, yeah, I'm very slightly, because I mean, I think they do it, it's like always, the guys are doing an incredible. And you're absolutely right to point out that it has improved, definitely improved, the issues that we were having. That's they have improved. I think the frustration is when we do have sickness, or when we do have lorries off the road, or whatever reason, it's always the same ones that get missed. And I think if you're unfortunate, we have to miss a group 1 week because, you know, sickness or whatever. We absolutely go to them the next week first, if you like. It's almost like what appears to happen is they start at point A and finish at point B, and, you know, if they've got staffing issues, you know, volume issues, it's always the ones on the end of the run that missed out. And I think if that happens, it can really be good. If the following week, they always start with them to make sure they're not missed for a second week, because I think that's, you know, that's certainly what was happening, and I'm going back to 10 weeks now, so, you know, but yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Right, we'll move to note on that one. Item 14.
That's in chair.
Oh yeah, 13. Sorry, I do apologise. That was item 12, wasn't it? Yes, item 13. Question by members. Questions to the leader or the chair of a committee submitted under Part 4 Council Procedure Rules, paragraph 10.4 of the Constitution. None received. Item 14. NMD Building Control. Report considered by the Strategy and Resources Committee on the 9th of January 2023. Laundry to report. Thank you.
Members, we took a report through Strategy and Resources on Monday with regards to North Devon Building Control Partnership that we've got with Mid Devon Council. So just for those members to remind them, we have a partnership with Mid Devon Council where the resources are pooled, the costs are shared proportionally based on the level of resources and income that comes in. For the last few months, we've been experiencing challenges with the workforce in terms of there is a deficit in the workforce and an inability to recruit with advertised posts, and have on a number of occasions resulted in 0 applications coming forwards, and that's resulted in the service going out to agency staff, which has proved extremely expensive and isn't sustainable into the long term. So because the service delivery is now obviously being impacted by that, we are still maintaining a really good share of the business. Over 75% of the market share goes through North and Mid Devon Building Control. However, those customers at some point are probably going to lose the will to stay with us if we continue with the inability with the service. So what we are looking for in terms of trying to bring some sustainability to the service is officers wish to minimise both that cost and also the reputational damage by looking at ensuring we can try and recruit surveyors and also retain the surveyors that we have got, with a view that the charge of level of the service, we can look to increase the fees and charges, still remain competitive, but enable us to be able to award the surveyors and also attract new surveyors with a 10% supplement for the current salary being offered. That would require an increase in the current fees by 8%, but officers have had a look at the level of our fees compared to our competitors, and even with an increase of 8%, still keeps the level of charges competitive with the existing market out there. So officers took a report through strategy and resources on Monday. The recommendation that was approved was that building control fees be increased by 8% with immediate effect for 22-23 onwards, subject to there being no adverse representations received following the notice of intention to make this change. Mid Devon Council are taking a similar report through their council, and officers would support that recommendation being approved by full council. It needs to come to full council because you're varying the fees and charges, and then inadvertently that affects the budget. So that's why the fees and charges change needs to come through full council for approval this evening. So Chair, the recommendation is in your report, and also a copy of the minute extract from strategy and resources from Monday, but I'm happy to take any questions from members.
Thank you. Councillor Davis. Well, it's very comprehensive. I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Second.
Right, thank you. All in favour? Thank you. Anyone against? Any abstentions? Thank you.
Yeah, just one final point on that same report. Obviously, on Monday, councillors Lane and Prowse declare non-registrable interest. So anyone who uses the service obviously should also declare that same.
Thank you.
You should, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, members.
Thank you. Item 15, council tax base 2023-2024. John, to report again.
Chair, stay standing.
Thank you.
Members, this is the setting of the council tax base. So it's not the formal setting of the council tax or the budget. That will all come to your February strategy and resources and full council meetings. But in advance of that, in order to then prepare the budget, we need to set the average number of properties that forms the council tax base. So this comes to you every year. In terms of some detail behind the calculation, behind the council tax base, it starts off with the total number of dwellings that's in the valuation office listing at the end of November 2022. There are then some adjustments carried out for the number of exempt and discount properties, the number of properties that attract single occupancy discounts that we referred to earlier within Ken Johnson's presentation. So single occupancy discounts of 25% come off the council tax bill. Also, you previously approved the council tax support scheme, where we award council tax support to those vulnerable households and those working age claimants. That reduces the level of council tax base that we have. And then that calculates your overall council tax base spread across bands A to band H. That's set out in the appendix in your report. And then we have a collection rate, which we've set at 97.5% for 23-24. That was currently at 97% when we set the budget for 22-23. We've looked at the collection rates up until the closing of 21-22, and the collection rate for last year was 96.89%. Collection rates this year are currently up on last year, which with the current climate is actually very pleasing. And our increase in direct debit customers has gone up as well. So with the current collection rate being slightly up on last year and last year's collection rate being 96.89%, we're proposing that the collection rate be 97.5% for 23-24. That does produce an increase in the council tax base. So the council tax base is set at 35,085.94, which is about a 1% increase on the council tax base from 22-23. So members, the recommendation in your reports in section 2.1 and 2.2 is the approval of that council tax base. I just need to note one spelling mistake that I made in the report. Apologies for that. In recommendation 2.2, there is 2000. The year says 2022 to 24. Should be 2023 to 24. So I do apologise for that. Make that amendment to the recommendation. But the calculation will be for the 2023-24 financial year. Let's take any questions, please.
Councillor Lane.
Chair, I just wondering why, because I think it went up 0.9% or something, didn't it?
That's correct, Jim.
I'm just wondering what the reason for the increase is. Does it go up each year?
It goes up each year. So in terms of The previous year for 22-23, it went up by about 375, average band D, which was just over 1%. It's gone up by 150 properties for 23-24. So some of that will be new builds and new properties coming on. Some of it will be empty properties going back into the council tax base. The reason it's not such a high increase is because you've approved a slightly different council tax support scheme for 23-24. So you've been, should we say, slightly more generous because you've awarded a higher level of council tax support to the lowest income band for those that claim council tax support. So whereas previously we awarded 80% council tax support, the lowest income band for working age claimants, we brought a proposal to council a couple of months ago where you increased that 80% to 100%. So the council are now supporting those most vulnerable householders with full council tax recovery. So that's the reason the council tax base hasn't increased so much, but it has still gone up by 150 points.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Loftus, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It's more of an observation than anything else. I know that a third of the number of council tax base is getting the 25% discount. So presumably that's single people. And I would guess the majority of those are going to be elderly. And that is going to create problems in the future for the economic situation in North Devon. In particular, that, you know, we're looking at, we know from the national statistics that we had through that the number of younger people is reducing in population and the older people are increasing. And that doesn't bode well for this council or for the area. And I just felt I need to bring that to your attention because it's something that you need to consider in the future when you're looking at planning for the economic cycles of things. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, yeah, the single occupancy discount does equate to quite a large number of properties. It is across different age bands. So obviously there are non-pensionable people that obviously do get single occupancy discount as well. And obviously the number of single people living on their own obviously is increasing as well. So there is a balance there. I think the important thing is that we carry out those regular reviews of single occupancy discount. As Ken Johnson highlighted earlier, that is the one area where potentially there are lots of people, and some of it is people forget to tell us that maybe they are now cohabiting, and obviously that single occupancy discount is still on their account. That's why it's important we carry out those regular reviews to make sure that number is as accurate as possible, and for our benefit, hopefully as low as possible.
Thank you. Councillor Roux.
Move those recommendations.
Right, I've still got a few more people to speak. Thank you. And Councillor Heedman.
I've changed mine. No, thanks, John. I mean, I just a quick question. I'm interested in the estimated premiums of plus 100%, plus 200%, and plus 300%. Obviously, fairly low numbers. So who are paying those plus 200% and plus 300%?
So they are properties that are empty and substantially unfurnished and have been for a long period of time. So currently those that are over 2 years will pay a premium of 100%. Those that are over 5 years will pay a premium of 200%, and over 10 years then goes up to 300%.
Good.
What we are looking to do is bring a report to council next month, which will be proposing those same level of discounts for next year. But as part of the Regeneration Levelling Up Bill, there are 2 proposals coming forwards, subject to that legislation being passed, that will bring the ability to charge the levy on the empty premium on the empty properties in 2 years back to 1 year, and also the ability to charge on second homes 200% council tax, by another 100% levy for council tax on second homes. That would be from 24-25 year. So it's for currently for those properties that are unoccupied and substantially unfurnished after a period of time.
Just quick on that. Brilliant. And you triggered another question. So currently there's no legislation to allow us to charge 200%.
Correct. There is.
We will be able to in the future. So
There is for the unoccupied and substantially unfurnished ones over 2 years, 5 years and 10 years, but the ability to be able to charge that after a year, and also then the ability to charge for second homes, that legislation is not.
So if like we or any other council at the moment, it's more an indication that that's what they're going to do rather than they are already receiving.
At the moment, none of those councils are able to charge that because the legislation has not been passed. A few councils are starting to take it through their councils, and some have done that already.
Yeah.
Um,
But nobody's actually receiving the money, that's the
no
point.
one's receiving the money yet. We're going to bring a report to February's meeting, so that if legislation is passed, we have to make that decision as a council before the 31st of March. If the legislation is passed, for us to then be able to charge it 12 months later in 24, 25, but that will be subject to the legislation being passed. But that's our intention, Chair.
Thank you, John, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Heather.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for your report, and I'm absolutely thrilled to bits that we are making it easier for people in the bottom band, with the lowest income people to be able to get a bigger discount. I think that's a really helpful thing for us to do. I was actually going to ask you about the different council tax bands, about non-collect, the people who don't pay, if it varies or if it's fairly much the same across the board.
In terms of the collection within the different bands,
Yeah.
I haven't got the collection rates per band. I mean, our collection rate is always around sort of 97.5% mark. That's not to say we don't try and get the 100%. This is what we budget for. There are always accounts where potentially there might be people who go into voluntary arrangements, voluntary insolvency arrangements, and therefore we end up having to write those off. And there's always an element of bad debt, but we do try to get back the 100% as much as we can. So I haven't got the collection rates across the bands, but I can get that from the team. Send it out to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
Yeah, just a follow-on from Councillor Biedemann's question, really. Where you've got properties where you're charging 200, 100 or 200% extra, are you actually finding that they're getting paid?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Majority say that I don't know the collection rates, but I'm not hearing of anything where we're finding it hard to not get that money from them. Obviously, the levy is there. We'd rather the property be back and be occupied and obviously be housed with obviously we have. So that's the intention of having the levy there. As much as I appreciate the extra revenue coming in, we only get to keep 10% of that as a local council. So personally, I'd rather see those properties be occupied and have none of those levies being charged.
Thank you. Okay, to adopt the recommendation, I had a mover from councillor Room. Do I have a seconder? Thank you. All in favour? Thank you. Anyone against? Any abstentions? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Item 16. Members' Allowance Scheme 2022-23. Consideration of uplift of allowances, pages 31 to 50. Ken Miles, Chief Executive Report.
Yeah, members, as you are aware, the members' allowances are set each year by you as full council after consideration of the report that comes through from the independent remuneration panel. That panel last met in March last year, and they recommended that for this year, the current year 22-23, the allowances would be increased in line with the percentage that was applied to the pay settlement for officers. That was fine, but when the pay settlement for officers was eventually agreed, it wasn't applied as a straight percentage. It was a flat rate of 1,920 that was applied to each officer. So depending on the rate of pay of that officer, it equated to a different percentage. And that percentage varied from 4.04 at the higher end, if you like, to 10.2%, I think it was, at the or 10.5% for the lower paid officers. So it's rather difficult to apply that percentage because there isn't any single percentage to apply to the allowances. So we got the panel back together again to ask them to come up with an appropriate percentage to apply. That panel has now come forward with a recommendation, and that's the report that you'll see on your papers at Appendix A. And what the recommendation is from that panel is that members apply a percentage of 4.04% for the current year. And that's based on what other local authorities are doing nationally and also regionally, or what they're considering doing. So that seems to be that across the board, that's what local authorities will be applying. That figure is budgeted for, so we don't have an issue with the current budget. You'll also see on your papers reference is made to a further report that's come through from the Independent Remuneration Panel, who have started to look at the allowances for future years, so for next year onwards. And you'll see that they're also recommending increases there. But given the fact that we have an election in May, and those allowances won't apply until the following year. It's considered that it's more appropriate for members to consider any increase to next year's allowances after the May election, so it'd be a new body of councillors looking at that. So for this year, the recommendation is 4.04% increase, and it's for members to decide whether they want to adopt that or not. The duty on you is to have regard to the recommendations that have been put forward by the panel, and that's the report that you have in front of you. But the recommendation from the panel and from us as officers is a 4.04% increase. What that will look like in practice is that the current basic allowance is £4,970.22, and that will increase to £5,171. And if you want to look at the detailed scheme, that's sent out in Appendix B on your papers, and that sets out the basic allowances and the special responsibility allowances, which will also increase proportionately as well.
Thank you. Councillor Kingston.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you, Chair. My position on these allowances actually hasn't changed since last year. I voted against them, and I think given the current circumstances where we have every single public sector just about going out on strike because they're struggling with their pay, I don't think it reflects very well on any councillor that then sits here and actually votes themselves up a pay rise, because effectively that's what it is. I appreciate it's been done by an independent body, but I voted against it last year and I didn't actually take the allowance, so I stopped that happening. And I just look at the other figure that's here, because overall it's just over £10,000 it will cost this council if we vote this through tonight. Well, I sat in the government's meeting last night along with two other councillors, and I listened to the planning officer, who are really struggling to get on board planning officers, senior planning officers, because they can't afford to pay them. It's a real struggle. We're all having problems with the planning department going through. What a nice gesture it would be if this council said, actually, that £10,000 we're thinking about voting through tonight was actually put back in the pot and could be used and maybe given to one of the departments that's really struggling to recruit people because of the level of pay. I appreciate it's probably different with the budgetary, but I just think it will look very bad on every single councillor here if we sit here and vote in a pay rise. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Bushell.
Well, it's not often I agree wholeheartedly with Councillor Henderson, generally on town council. I think that we should lead by example. I think there are hard times in our communities, and I think that the councillors should show a level of sacrifice by keeping the allowances as they are at the present day.
Thank you. Councillor Lever.
Thank you, Chair. I almost don't know where to start with this, but as councillors, our role is to represent the communities that elect us. And for us to do that effectively, we need to have as broad a range of people come forward to be councillors as we possibly can, from every walk of life, from every community, from every age group, from every economic background. The amount of money that we get paid in allowances is helpful, but it is difficult to imagine anyone being able to live on the amount of money that we're talking about. And the increase that we're talking about is not going to make the difference between, being able to get your roof repaired or whatever. It is the amount of money that we're talking per year for councillors, the allowance that we get, it is not huge. There is a significant amount that we put in terms of public service, and public service is really important. It really matters. And I don't think there's anybody here, well, you'd be mad if anybody here was going to put themselves forward to be a councillor without public service being at the core of that. We do not do this for fame or fortune. We work hard. We work damn hard. Well, certainly I work hard, and I know a lot of my colleagues do as well. I think that we have, in my time as being a district councillor, We have, the age profile of this council has reduced significantly. I think that's a really good thing. It is a really good thing. It is a really good thing if people, when we're out there, we're talking to our residents and people are interested in their local community. They want to do good work for their local community and they see the council as being a vehicle for doing that. It is a good thing that we can say, hey, we can't, you know, you do not have to be either well off enough that the expenses don't, the allowances don't matter, or that you're retired. We should not need to rely on people being either wealthy or retired and not to have to worry about the allowances in order for them to be able to put their hands up and say, I would like to be a councillor. I would like to work for my community. I would like to represent the people in the area that I've been elected to represent. I think that we are not overpaid. I would challenge anybody to live on what we get as an allowance. We are at the bottom, I believe, or down towards the bottom of the level of allowances in Devon. I think it is incumbent upon us to try to encourage the best of our communities to come forward to be councillors. I think this is part of it. I think this is an absolutely crucial part of our efforts to try to seek equality and inclusion. So absolutely, I will be supporting this.
Thank you. Councillor Peterman.
Thank you, Chair. I'm quite relieved that I won't end up on a Facebook ad read by the Lib Dems and just the last speaker, but there we are. I've hit a bit of sympathy support with Matt and Paul. I think you make a really good point. But I also totally agree with Councillor Lever. I think the point is we do want it to be inclusive. We don't want to bar people from becoming councillors simply on their economic situation. I'm very, very lucky that I would have supported family, a supportive employer, and it allowed me to come into local government at 40 when I first came into the council. I was pretty much the youngest. And, by quite a far away, it's lovely to see people now that are probably about the same age as I was when I started. And that probably is because I think, especially, with things like the allowance, you can put the carers allowance if you can claim, et cetera, et cetera. But I think I'd draw your attention, because I think this report's really good by the independent body, actually. I mean, it's really good, and I really good read. And the fact of the matter is, none of us have to claim that basic allowance. It is really to reflect the time that you have to give up from your normal day job to carry out your council duties. So none of us have to actually claim it. And I congratulate all of the police stated that you didn't claim. I assume meant the increase element of it, but whatever it was, and I think we can all make those individual choices. I think reality is if we don't feel that we want to claim it or need to claim it, then we do put it back into the council tax office. That really for me is important. It's not for us to go and dish out here or anywhere. I think it's important to put it back into the council, because at the end of the day, it's council tax money, parents' money we claim, and if we don't need it or don't want it, let's put it back in the pot for it to be spent wisely, if you like, for council services. So I think it is, for that reason, that's why I will support the increase. I think it is on that bottom end, isn't it? I think even the industries that are striking when they've been offered 5%, which is about the common level where people are striking. I think 4.04% is really on the low end of that. But I think, like I say, perfectly reasonable. I'm good thinking about my increase, because I think I'm in a luckier position now than I was 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I lost money by being a councillor. Luckily, 10 years on, my mortgage payments are lower, and maybe I personally be able to forgo the actual extra. But I would hate to think, come May, that we've got people not standing for election if they can't afford to. So that's why I'll second the motion. I don't know if Councillor Lever moved the motion, but I'll second.
We haven't got to that bit yet. Thank you.
Sorry,
can I just take, because I've got quite a list in a minute, and then I'll come back to you. Thank you. Councillor Tucker.
Thank you, Chair. As most of you know, I've been here for a few years, and probably my term as district councillor is coming to an end, but we've been behind for many years. Not a lot, but behind. And I'm not going to repeat what Councillor Lever and Beedham has said, but they're 100% right in everything they say. If we're going to attract the right type of person to become a district councillor, then we must pay sensible, if you like, reimbursement of what people are going to lose. But Councillor Henderson is right. If he doesn't want to take his allowance, that's up to him. And the same can be made for Councillor Butcher. But I will move the recommendation.
Councillor Walker.
Yeah, as probably one of the diverse group that has been attracted to be a local councillor, district councillor in particular, there is no way on this earth I can afford to be a district councillor without a councillor's allowance. I actually spent about, after I became a district councillor, I actually had to spend about 5 different phone calls to the Department for Work and Pensions to justify why I had suddenly got a salary coming in. They didn't even know what a district councillor was. So I very much enjoy doing the work I do. I hope that I'm supporting my community. I think that my community thinks I give them some support. I hope so anyway. And I would like to carry on doing that, but the cost of living is going up. It costs us more to put fuel in our car, and I know we can claim that mileage allowance and things like that, but I prefer to have a councillor's allowance, which I think, in my respect, that covers things like my mileage for come to and from council meetings. So I would like to second the motion.
Okay, Councillor Tots.
Thank you, Chair. So having sort of done a bit of back and envelope calculation, I think you correct me, John, if I'm wrong, but I think it works out about £20 per person per month, something like that, £10,000 a year. For me, I'm fortunate that the money isn't a massive issue for me. I'm employed and comfortable enough, albeit my wife's about to take a year off work from the same thing. So the money's kind of like neither here nor there. What I wanted to respond to really is Matt and Paul's point about some public sector workers striking over the fact that the cost of living has increased, pay hasn't increased at the same rate, and therefore people are struggling left, right, and centre. That is absolutely true. We've got people who work in Royal Mail, we've got people on council who work in the NHS, we've got people who work in education. I think we've got ourselves in a funny position if we want to support people who are feeling that they have to strike, they have to forego pay to try and improve their working conditions and their pay. If we turn around and say, well, we're not taking it, there'll be people who look at that and think, well, neither should. If the councils don't need the money, then why do people who are working in the public sector need it? I think actually we need to show, it shows solidarity with those groups. If we say, well, actually, the cost of living has increased, everybody deserves a pay rise, everybody deserves to be paid better, so everybody can afford to sustain a decent standard of living. And so if we want to set an example, I think that's the way we should go.
Thank you. Councillor York.
Yeah, thank you. I've got a bit of bad back.
Do you need to sit down?
I'm okay. Yeah, I don't appreciate being guilt tripped into surrendering a potential deserved increase. I refer members to item 15 of the report, which explains all the different reasons why the money is allocated. I know I put my all into my role. It's certainly in all the time and effort going to outside body meetings, and I'm here, there and everywhere. And I don't claim a penny of the travel allowances unless I'm going further afield. Every time I run up and down here, I don't bother to claim that. So I feel that money is going towards, keeping me going on doing all the council work. So yeah, I'm totally in agreement with Councillor Lever and various other people who've agreed. And Councillor Tots, what he just said, hadn't even thought of, and I think that was actually gold, what he's just said. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lever, I'll come back to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chair. The other thing I think it is really worth just reminding ourselves This is not salary. This isn't paid, we are not paid as a wage, okay? So I'm in the process of doing my tax return for 21, 22. I can't tell you the joy that brings to my world. Oh, and I am going through various income. Now, this money is taxable, you know, we pay tax on this money. We also, because it is not pension, it was taken out of the pensionable, being pensionable money by the dear Eric Pickles. Thank you very much indeed. Now, as a mum who has taken some years off to work part-time to bring up children and indeed stepchildren, there are many years when I have not been working full-time. So I have many years still to go, even at my huge age, but I have many years still to go before actually I will be able to get my full entitlement for state pension, you know, which is not vast. This money, part of the allowance, I pay towards that. This money, we must not think of this as wages. This is an allowance, and this is an allowance to help us cover the costs that allows us to do public service. I also do not appreciate being guilt-tripped by either Councillor Bushell or Councillor Henderson on this. I think we need to be inclusive and we need to understand that this money, this is not a large amount of money, 20 quid a month. You know, who out there probably realises how little the money is that we get for the work that we do. I would love to third this if I could, this motion.
Thank you. Even I'm going off brain now. Councillor Levering, sorry.
Okay, so as everybody knows, I work for the NHS. No, I'm not out on strike because we are the RCN, not the RGN, which is midwives. But the only way I could be councillor and work for the NHS was to cut my hours from 37.5 down to 30 hours a week. So the salary makes up what I lose. I do pick up the odd overtime shift, but the only way to become a councillor and to have a job is to go back to part-time. So I lose basically about £400 a month by being councillor instead of working full-time. So yeah, that money means something to me. And I think if we want to incorporate more councillors onto this council, the fund to say that, yeah, you can fit this into your life, you can work part-time, we will be able to offer you this allowance, along with your wages. I think we'll get more people working for councillors.
Yeah. Thank you. I've heard all what you said, and I'll be honest, I totally agree in this sense that myself, I'm fortunate. I don't need, you know, like a few years as well to rely on it, because I know for the fact I've dipped into my own pocket quite a lot, but that's my choice. But I quite agree. Nobody here should feel guilt-tripped in any shape or form. And you've all got your own minds. You can all make your own decisions, and that's what we're doing now. So we've had a mover, we've had a seconder. All in favour? Thank you. Anyone against? Anyone abstaining? 2. Thank you. That's carried. Okay, swiftly moving on. Item 17, proposed committee timetable 2023 to 2024, pages 51 to 64, report by Senior Corporate and Community Services Officer, Ben.
Thank you, Chair. So members, this report is presented to Council on an annual basis. It sets out the timetabling for standing council and committee meetings and recommends a proposed timetable for 23-24. Paragraph 4.1 in the report sets out the principles of timetable of the meetings. These principles are the same as for 22-23, with the exceptions of the Licensing and Community Safety Committee. In 22-23, Council agreed to schedule the committee meetings at alternate times to enable more attendance in the evenings. However, meetings being held in the evenings have not increased attendance, and therefore it is recommended that all meetings for this committee are held during the daytime. The recommendation in the report is that recommended that Council adopt the timetable of Council and committee meetings for 23-24 as detailed in Appendix A of the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Biederman.
Oh, not questions. I was going to move it and thank.
Okay, Councillor Bushell.
We've just been talking about trying to make council more attractive to a different demographic. And now we have a recommendation to move all of the meetings during the day, which will,
No.
some of them during the day.
Chairs, there's a license and community safety committee only.
Yeah, but it may not have worked for the demographic we've got here today. But if we're saying, as we've heard, that people are having to lose hours at work to attend things, and that we'd like younger people and a more balanced demographic on the council, I think it's a retrograde step to be moving things to be during the day, unless there is a very specific reason. Because we saw 4 years ago, the demographic or the age dropped significantly for this council. It may well happen that even younger people come through, people who have got families and commitments during the day, therefore they can't join the council because of
I
that.
think at the moment we're talking about here and now. I think once the elections are over, and things will change.
I just think that there's a level of hypocrisy over the last debate and this
Sorry,
debate.
I think it's pointless having evening meetings if no one's turning up to them. Councillor York.
Yeah, thank you. The initial changes were in part related to my work role. I think it was the Policy Development Committee that used to be at 2 o'clock and I couldn't attend those meetings. Those meetings were adjusted for my needs, and there's no reason we're going forward. If the new administration needs different times, that won't be looked at. As evidenced by what Bev has said, we have trialled 6:30, alternating with 10 o'clock, and the 6:30 has not increased attendance. So going forward, we're saying 10 o'clock, but if it can change, it can be changed.
Thank you, Councillor York. Councillor Tucker.
Councillor York has said exactly basically what I was going to say.
Thank you very much. Councillor Beederman.
Yeah, similar, Joe, I think.
Thank you very much.
But remember, people with childcare and responsibilities
Of
might
course.
well find it
Yes.
easier to be here at 10 o'clock
Yes, yes.
during the school day than they are at
You do,
6 o'clock.
yeah. That's like that can be
You
looked at
take
as
each
well.
individual.
Yeah, that's right. Councillor Roos.
I was just gonna say, I'll second Frank's proposal, because obviously it'll be a new council, and if that new council want to change it, then they'll just have to put a motion in council to change it.
Correct. Councillor Lovering.
Can I just say, it's a very prehistoric view that everybody works 9 to 5 Monday to Friday. Tesco's opens 24 hours a day, the NHS opens 24 hours a day. So some people probably would like a morning meeting, some people would like an evening meeting. Everybody keeps saying, oh, you get 2 days a weekend off. No, not if you work at Tesco's or Asda. So, you know, things, it's a post office, everybody works 24/7 these days. The new committees can then decide when they start, oh, my job role is, and this is what I have on. It'll be up to them to decide when they want their meeting.
Correct. Thank you very much for that. Right, we have a mover, we have a seconder, all in favour. Anyone against? Any abstentions? No, that's one abstention. Yes.
Sorry, Chair, can I just ask a
Yes.
question on that? Bearing in mind, this could well all be changing, unless there's actually some local government ruling as to why it needs to be done now, why couldn't these be set after the election? And that, at that point every year?
I don't get. Sorry. Thank you. Ben, would you like to answer that? Thank you.
There would be certain meetings that we need to schedule in diaries sort of now, like thinking of the planning committee, licensing community safety committee. If we waited until council met after the elections, that would mean those committees couldn't meet until the council considered.
Thank you. Okay, trying to move, we've done all that. Item 18, sorry, can we have one conversation, please?
Good morning, mate, Chair. Thank you very much.
Item 18, member training induction programme 2023, they have to report again.
Thank you, Chair. So this report outlines the member training induction programme for councillors following the district elections in May this year for both newly elected and re-elected councillors. The purpose of the training induction programme is to ensure that all councillors are fully trained in all aspects of their duties and ensure that mandatory training is provided to members prior to them assuming their roles on committees and in their roles as a councillor. The programme has been drafted in consultation with the cross-party member working group. Appendix A sets out the mandatory training sessions that councillors are required to attend and also includes the target councillors required to attend each session. There are a number of mandatory sessions which all councillors will be required to attend as a councillor. Mandatory training is also provided for members of some committees, such as the planning, licensing and governance committees, and failure to attend those training sessions would result in the council not being able to sit on that committee. Appendix B sets out the proposed training sessions which are voluntary, and Appendix C sets out the proposed format for the member induction date on the morning of Friday, the 12th of May, which will be mandatory for all councillors. Training will be provided either in person or virtually, depending on the type of training being provided and also the requirements of the trainer. A number of sessions are also being held jointly with Norwich District Council to share costs. Following approval of the training programme, it will be published and prospective candidates will be informed to ensure that they're fully aware of the commitment and the mandatory training required if they're successfully elected. So members, the recommendation is that recommended that member training induction programme as detailed in appendices A to C be adopted, which also incorporates the mandatory training sessions. Thank you.
Councillor Tucker.
As our officer has said, that this was a small group of all-party committee, and I was one of it, one of the committee. And thanks, Bev, for all the work you've put in, but I think there's a lot of thought gone in, and I would just like to move the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All in favour? Anyone against? Any abstentions? One abstention.
Sorry, Chair, I just want to.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Walker.
Sorry. Just wanted to say that I was in the fortunate position of being able to attend quite a lot of the non-mandatory training, and I found it most useful. So not just in councillor, like actually. I would recommend, if anybody is recommending being a councillor to anybody else, I'd recommend the non-mandatory training as well as the mandatory, because it's really good quality training that's provided.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you. Okay, item 19, I think 2 people are leaving the room. There's one.
You can stay for the report.
Oh, excuse me.
Sorry.
So we got.
Yeah, no, yeah. I mean, feel free to leave it if you like,
Right,
but it's only for the delivery.
I'll just say what's what.
Sorry, Chair.
Item 19. Sorry. It's the weather, I'm blaming the weather. Ashford Parish Council. Appointment of temporary parish councillors, pages 85 to 86, and report by senior solicitor and monitoring officer assignment. Would you mind, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So just to clear up the interest, it's only for the deliberation and votes that you would need to leave, given the nature of the interest. So you can listen to the report and talk as a member of the public if you wish. But yeah, so just to clear that up. But yeah, so this report relates to a bit of a sad case really of Ashford Parish Council unfortunately not not having met for more than 6 months due to in internal disputes in the parish council and even a legal claim being made by one of the former parish councillors, resulting in them not being able to obtain insurance when they tried to renew, and therefore being being up feeling they couldn't meet. So under section 85 of the Local Government Act, that means that automatically they cease to be parish councillors, and therefore there are no parish councillors currently for Ashford Parish Council. So the purpose of this report is that under section 91 of the Local Government Act 1972, the District Council is able to appoint temporary parish councillors even. The District Council could opt to not appoint temporary parish councillors, given that there are fewer than 6 months until the next election. But our view is that it would seem in the interest of the community that urgent business is intended to, such as setting the precept and trying to set the parish council up again, so that it's in a good position for any new potential parish councillors that wish to put themselves forward. So yeah, so under section 991, it's proposed that we appoint 3 councillors, which is the minimum term to make it for it, and it's accepted practice to do that by firstly go to the local ward member and then the county councillor, both of which have agreed, and then further a neighbouring ward member. So that's how we've reached the 3 that are on the order that's annexed to the report. So the recommendation today is to use the district council's powers under section 91 to appoint the 3 councillors. Yeah.
Councillor Lane,
I move the recommendation.
do you know who the councillors are?
What's your next question?
Just checking.
I want to know what they're allowing to.
Right, hang on a minute, you can't have any votes until they've left the room. That's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, all in favour? Anyone against? The abstentions? Right, yeah, they can come back.
Fair enough.
Thank you. I missed that then. Okay, item 20, report of lead members for climate change, page 87 to 88, report by councillor Lofthouse.
Thanks, Chair. Very short report to put on the agenda. There's some slight adjustments to that. In that, after discussion with environmental health officers, environmental enhancement officer, it would seem that we don't have enough time really to do the job properly for March. And budget has not been counted. So the suggestion is that we join with other groups and put something on later on in the year. Timing yet to be agreed, but the council would also like to be involved in the Green Week, which happened in June. My concern is that we need something before then, because of course climate change is something that is affecting people in the fact that at the moment they're having to spend a lot more money on heating their homes, and we need to be able to make them more aware of how they can ease that burden and insulate or whatever they can do within their means and within the government programs that they might be able to get hold of to help them fund it. So in addition to that then, I would say that the strategy and resources report that you've had has within it the corporate plan delivery, and within that we've got the environmental enhancement, which shows the progress that's being made for climate change within the council, which is good. It's good news. It's a good start. We started from 0 in 2019, then we were halted because of COVID. So the progress we have made, I think, is excellent. Just got to keep it going and keep the policy which is now in place. Strategies are all in place to get them applied throughout the council, which I know is happening. So that is really good news. With regard to the Climate Awareness Week, my request to all councillors is that they get involved, but they also get their parishes involved. We need it to be as widely advertised as possible, otherwise it's not that aware for the public. And it's essential to do this, that everybody plays their parts, because if humans intend to inhabit this world, the remainder of its expected lifespan, which is something like 4.5 billion years, then we need to do something, because at the current predictions, the most that humanity can expect is a few centuries. So, you know, a number of generations before things get really, really serious. And we have shortages of everything, and possibly another mass extinction. Will be the dinosaurs then. The other thing is that I've been promoting sustainability and inclusion of true sustainability of housing and new housing building within the local plan review. What I'd like to see is something, and this needs to come from central government, but we might be able to help that along, is to see that that new houses that are built do not need to be retrofitted to meet the 2050 net zero vehicle requirement. And that's what we need to be putting in place as soon as we can. Sorry, that concludes my report. I don't know if anybody's got any questions.
Thank you. Anyone got any questions?
No.
No? Okay, move to no on that. Item 21, I have a mover and a seconder to take it in block, please. Everyone. Okay, all in favour? Good, thank you very much. And one thing before you all run away, because you literally will be running away in a minute. You've actually got 10 minutes to get out of the building, otherwise you'll be locked in. And the car can be locked as well. And thank you. Happy New Year to you all, and thank you for coming tonight.
Stop, mate.